Hey everyone, I'm Tony Marfione, owner and founder of Microtech Knives. We're going to take an in-depth look today at doing a Tsukamaki wrap on a product that we call the Combat Wakizashi. We make these through Marfione Custom Knives. They're all handmade, and you know, everybody knows that I've been collecting Japanese antiques for like all my life. You know, I have antiques ranging from the 1200s all the way up to Gendai made today. So we're going to definitely take a look, and we'll show you a little bit on the collection. But the Tsukamaki art form is something that I probably enjoy the most out of anything that I do. You know, I typically don't do it at the shop. It's my time to sit down and get inside my head, so I typically will do it at home or in my library or just somewhere where I just have an open space for my mind to breathe just a little bit. So check this out. You know, this is my library in my home, and a lot of the antiques that I've been able to acquire over the years. You know, I used to go to Japan often, and I go this year again. I'm so excited. You know, my wife and I are gonna, you know, it's going to be her first time, so I get a chance to see some friends and family when I get back to Japan. So, of course, I'll have an opportunity to stop at some of the sword shops. But some of these things I've acquired stateside, some of them overseas. But you know, one particular proportion of my collection is the Yoshihara family. So, you know, Yoshindo, of course, being I'm one of his greatest fans. I own many pieces of his work. His brother, his grandfather, and of course his late son. So I'm going to just grab one of my favorite pieces that I have here, you know, from Yoshindo, and a katana, just beautifully made. It's Choji Hamon, just a beautiful, beautiful sword. Like I said, as far as modern makers are concerned, Yoshindo's at the top of my list as far as my favorites are concerned. So we're going to move on here in a second. And definitely stay tuned, because we're thinking about doing a video on what we consider to be sword etiquette and some cleaning and maintenance. I think it's something that everybody should see. I've had to learn over the years, just on a level of courtesy when handling these amazing blades. They host the different things that we have, subas, fittings, and different knickknacks that I've acquired over the course of some time. You know, some of my favorite fittings are from the Omori school. They're just fabulous, hard to get around. This case here, some blades ranging from the 1200s on up. Some of the couple pieces that I have that are just fantastic were Mokansa blades. I can't remember the actual smith, but they were polished by a national living treasure, Honami Nishu, and his work is just incredible. It's like a sheet of glass when you look down these pieces, and the polishing techniques and just bringing out the grain and the hamon and everything else is just amazing. But these pieces are probably some of the finest ones in my collection. On this side, you know, I've had a fetish for the Tadayoshi blades and their generations, and I have everything ranging from Gen 1 with a few in between, all the way up to the different generations of Tadayoshi blades, including a test cut, two-body test cut that I received from my bro Sebastian one year for my birthday. So, like I said, the study of the sword has been just something I've been passionate about, that I do, and it's again, it's something that I do as you know, it's my passionate hobby to preserve these pieces. So. All right, we're going to get started. You know, typically there's, again, a tremendous amount of different options you could do to do a Tsukamaki wrap. There's, you know, I've seen it done with very, very fine silk. I've seen it done with cotton. I've seen it done with much smaller braids, just incredible stuff, as you can see on some of the swords I have here. Today I'm going to use a leather, a black leather, and it's Sukagawa. And I purchased this from a shop out of Japan, and I have for a long, long time. So, you know, I've often wondered, you know, when I first got started, it's just like, how do you know how much to use so you don't have a bunch of waste on the end? It's pretty interesting. You know, I had an opportunity to do a little bit of study under a Japanese sword polisher that actually did some restoration and some things, and just taught me some really neat tricks, but it seems to work every time. So on this one here, typically what you're doing on this to measure it is you're wrapping it, the handle completely all the way to the end, back, and then halfway back. And if you could get to that point, it always leaves you a little bit of a remnant on the back, but not a whole lot of waste. So I'm gonna go ahead and verify this particular piece that I had already out for today. So we're just gonna go ahead and just start to wrap that. You know, if you had multiples of, let's say, if you're a knife maker and you have a small batch of blades, doing this accurately the first time, you don't have to wrap every single knife handle that you do unless they vary in different lengths. You can go ahead and make one template, and then from there you can, you know, keep a little notebook and, you know, measure the length with a tape measure or something along those lines, so you don't have to spend your time doing this particular procedure. It's likely that this piece that I'm using has been cut at one time or another, but I'm going to show you the technique either way. So as we're going, judging by the length of this piece, I'm thinking it could have been the last time I did these walks, which has been a minute. So we're pretty excited. This particular piece that I have in my hand is the blank, or the billet was forged by Coy Baker and from Baker Forge, and my friend JB from JB Blades actually ground this blade, and it's beautiful. So, okay everyone, I'm on my final stretch here. I've gone over the handle twice and halfway back. So if you need to gauge, that's how you do it. One forward, one aft, and then halfway back. It works every single time. So this piece apparently certainly was cut for this length of handle, or tsuka as we call it. So another thing that I use, you know, because, you know, most of the Japanese swords would be, you know, the same magnolia wood, or however that they make the shirsaya and everything else would have the actual tsuka itself, and they would inset ray skin or other items, contour the handle to give it that really beautiful wasted shape. I've seen them straight, but I like the real nice wasted Coca-Cola bottle shape handles that are super sexy. But another thing I use, since I do adhere stingray skin, typically tan stuff, you know, the same skin or shark skin as they call it, in the natural condition, almost as rough as a potato chip, and you have to soak it to make it pliable and everything else. So on these particular pieces though, I'll just, you know, I'll get the pelts at the show or get them from a couple different suppliers. So they're fun to use. This one here is a stingray skin that's been lacquered in a really nice satin gloss OD green, and it's just super. It goes really good with the copper in this blade, and it'll pair up very nicely with the manuki or the ornaments I'm going to use up underneath the handles. Okay, so if you're wrapping these handles and they're flat and they don't have a nice contour, either way if they did, I learned to use a paper. It actually builds up the corners of the actual wraps themselves, giving it more definition as you do this. The term is hishigami, and you make them out of, you can make them out of rice paper, you can make them out of craft paper. I've even opened up swords and seen newsprint underneath. So it's kind of cool. You just kind of measure them up. I typically get the materials, and I'll use, you know, for any kind of adhesive, it's probably safe to use like Elmer's glue. I know that that's not a super high pliable thing, but for paper and something you're going to get wet and getting it on your blade or getting it on your clothes, it's going to work to your advantage. So I make these little strips. I just fold up the papers like these. I set them on, you know, books or something on top of them to make them, and they're pretty sturdy. I'll split them down the middle and mark them, you know, for the length. Split them down the middle, and then I make these small little triangles, which are kind of really cool, you know, and stuff like that. And I'll use these to build up the edge. So as you see me wetting these and putting them up underneath my wrap, it kind of builds up the edges just a little bit. It's not required that you follow any of this. I mean, you could wrap it however, but this is how I've learned, and this is how I do this particular build. Typically, or traditionally, you start your wrap on the presentation or show side, as they would call it. And so that's going to start, typically samurai, if they would wear their blades, would be edge up, and that would be the side that would start the wrap. So I'm going to get started. I have my Tsukagawa ready to rock and roll. I have a clamp and I'm going to get started. So the very first one that I do is going to be much smaller, a straight piece to place up on the top. So I'm going to get these kind of damp, get a few of these going. I don't let them soak in the water, but I'll get them damp as I go, just enough to kind of soak them. And just doing the water just a little bit is going to make them just enough to be pliable to put up underneath the wrap. So we'll get started here. Okay. I might have to cut that just a hair smaller. Just using a little, like half, just to get up underneath that leather. Having a nice little clamp or something just to kind of go onto the sides, kind of hold your spot as you flip the blade. Okay. Get myself positioned for the next. The next one is going to be actually twist, so I'm going to put a Ishigami underneath the very first wrap up into the corners like so. The second one on this side. So the first wrap, get that tucked, bring it over, twist, cupping the Ishigami on the one side. Ready here. Take my clamp off. Got the first one. Second one twisting. It's a pretty common wrap. I mean, I've seen everything from combat wraps to pinch to just so many different styles, but this is the one that I do. It's the most common that you'll probably likely see. You know, I use a little hammer. You could use a little wooden hammer, plastic hammer, nothing too crazy. What that does, that kind of taps that down, you know, to kind of, you don't have to go nuts pulling it, but you can get it pulled just enough and it's super tight. Okay. Sometimes a lot of guys, if they use silk, what they'll do is they'll soak the silk in a warm water. Of course, you know, let it almost dry, but have it damp as they're wrapping it. And what that'll do is that'll actually allow the silk to expand a bit. And when that shit dries, it makes up for a very, very well done wrap on the handle. So that's another trick. But with the Tsukamaki, we're not going to put anything on the leather itself. Okay, start on the opposite side again. Okay, so that one there I did. Okay. So what I'm doing is I'm alternating the braids. And the reason being for that is if you make them all the same way and you get a cut, let's say on the Tsuka or something like that, it all unravels. So the whole idea of alternating underneath, alternating from back to back, is what you're doing is if it takes a fray in the handle, it frays in one spot. You know, you might get a little loose end, but if you do it all the same direction, that's fine. You could do it that way, but the reasoning behind alternating them is so that if it gets frayed or cut, it doesn't unwrap and come all undone. So this next wrap, we're gonna go opposite of what we just did, and we'll continue to alternate. Another set of Ishigami underneath the wrapping corners themselves here, and then one here. Cupping that side, bringing it over. There we go. You know, some of this just takes a little bit of practice, but I'm trying to get those wraps right over the top, right down through the center, You could adjust them just a little bit as you go. The whole idea is to get that pinch right down through the center line of your handle. So pulling it tight, but tapping it down. Gotta be careful with the leather just a little bit because it is kind of pliable and stretchy. And if you pull them too tight, you're gonna start disfiguring the actual leather itself. So the silk is a little bit more, you know, resilient to get that, but the tapping actually seats it down instead of overstretching the leather. You could tap these down, whether you use a little wooden hammer, just something soft on the face. I use, I've been using this little hammer, so takedown tool for the swords and stuff, so it's kind of neat. So I did want to talk about, traditionally I'll put ornaments underneath the handle, like on the traditional Japanese swords. This year, or at least on this particular piece, I'm using a, they're not super big, but it kind of matches the blade. It's going to be an Edo period set of Menuki that has some gold and copper. Just really, really cool. I thought it would fit this motif. So sometimes we do that. Sometimes I'll make my own Menuki to go up underneath, which is usually the Marfione dagger or a collaboration or something. But this round, we're going to go ahead and we're going to do these up underneath this particular wrap. Typically it's into the third fold in is traditionally how it would be done to get them started. And then on the last three before you tie the rear end of the handle. So as you can see, I had an indent placement. A lot of the times the Menuki will have a little stud, cast into the piece however they make it, and I made an indentation to keep it from sliding. Sometimes they don't have that. But you could use hishigami to underneath it to actually grab the piece and sink into the raised skin as well if they don't have the indentations. It makes it a little bit more pliable, but that's not moving, that's not going anywhere, especially up underneath this wrap. So the first Menuki has been set. So I'll force the pinch down into the hishigami, and I'll work from the top of the knife, or from the top of the handle down inwards. Now since it's going upwards, that'll loosen it. So working from the top of the twist down will stretch the leather just enough to make it just as tight as possible. I mean, you could overdo this with this here because it disfigures the leather. I've done some of the walks with traditional silk that I've gotten in. Not many. There's probably less than a half a dozen in its entire program that I've done with silk, with various Menukis that I've either made or use of antique ones. Sometimes if your Menuki snake down the handle, you'll have to cup them or bow them so that they don't stick up above. So a lot of times you just have to bow them in and then tuck them in, just a hair. Sometimes you have to use two depending on the height of the Menuki itself. But there's no right or wrong way to set the hishigami as long as at the end of the day you can't physically see it. So a lot of times I'll have to spend a minute after the wrap is done, and I'll have to go back in with a small pick and make sure that every corner is tucked properly and the hishigami is just seated well up underneath the wrap. And if there's any, because this is joined, you think this is leather, you could see the small seam where they join these and fold them over. Sometimes you'll see a little bit of that fray, just a hair, and I'll use like India ink to actually color that, not marker, India ink. And I mean, you could use marker, why not, right? But India ink works good for us. Of course, on the traditional, what I call the silk wrapping, which is really, really nice. It's just a matter of making sure that you can't see the hishigami underneath, whether you use black or whether you use white or whatever. I remember the first ones that we made of the walks. I was living at in a house in Asheville, and we had, I was transitioning some of our stuff from Bradford to North Carolina, and the first ones were made in the garage, in that shop garage that I had. Some of you have seen that. I remember wrapping those, making sheath, making everything else, and in that little shop garage. And then when Du Hara come to study with us, I remember him doing Tsukamaki in the main dining room like all day. It brings back memories for me. It's fun. So everybody, in getting ready to do their rear end knot, I'm at the very, very end of the Tsuka. So I've seen this done a bunch of different ways, and again, you could do it however you feel fit, but this way I have some notes that I kind of cheat on this here to reference, because there's probably 25 known ways that I know how to, I've seen it done, but it's been a minute since I've done these. So what we're going to do is we're going to pull, fold this over, pull this through, and we'll pull this through, fish this through this secondary knot like so. And then the same thing through the other side, it's going to get pushed through and pulled through that first knot. And then this one is going to go back through around the knot and then back through that way. Then both of them will get fished through to the other side. So here we go. Anyway, what I used to fish that through is, like I was saying before, is I made this little tether out of some, an old, sewing needle with a blunt on it, curved it. You could use Spectraline or use any of this type of stuff. Back in the day when I first learned how to do it, that old 32 millimeter film that you would get out, the negative, super, super tough, resilient stuff. And you'd get that and cut it into strips with points, fine points, and you'd fish the points through, put the Tsukamaki through the actual piece, and it would fish it right through. You got to use some pliers to do it. So this particular knot could be a little tight, so we're going to go ahead and fish this through first. Okay. Got to get through my knots. There it is. And what we're going to do is we'll fold that over and make sure. Make sure I get that. It's going to be like this, and it's just going to fold it like so. A lot of times you could even wet it, just a little bit of lube goes a long way. But going to get this like such, and we're going to go ahead and we're going to pull that through, as you just seen, and it helps you fish that piece all the way through the rear end. Okay, so that'll be, and we're going to stuff a piece of hishigami underneath on the very, very, very last one that we do. Get the next one ready here in just a second. So we're going to get that up underneath that knot just a hair, like such. So that one's going to be pushed, and I'll fish that to one side, making room for the other side to be pulled through. Same thing, I am going to fish that through. That through like such. Okay. That one gets stuck through like so. And both of these now will be fished through the back side of the knife to continue the other side. We are going to fish through back up this way. Again, one more time, getting this one here. It's going to come up underneath through this segment here. cut that and snip it, and it's going to be tucked up underneath here. This one's going to come back around, over, come back through, and then tucked again. And then it'll be done. And a lot of times what I'll do is I'll put a little bit of adhesive in there to set that up so that it cannot come loose. I'm just going to fish this one back through just to hold it, to keep it tight while I do this knot. Okay. So we're going to get on this side of the knot, like so. This one here. Yep. Get it tucked. This is super tight, so there we go. There it is. Perfectly done. At least as perfect as I can get it today. So this one here, what I'll do is I don't have the adhesive here, but I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to snip that, and then I'll tuck it up underneath that knot, and she'll be finished. So there she is with the knots. Feels good. There's JB's grind on this blade, just really came out really phenomenal. Ring the bell. Hey everyone, I hope you enjoyed today's tutorial on the Tsukamaki wrap that we did on this combat wok. So I wanted to thank Coy Baker from Baker Forge and Tool for doing an amazing job on these blanks. Stay tuned because we definitely got a few more coming through. My friend Jordan at JB Blades for doing an unbelievable heat treat and grind as well. And for the sheath, it's not in yet, but we'll definitely get you some pictures from Ben over at Chattanooga Leatherworks. So definitely like, share, and subscribe. I hope you've enjoyed the day, and we will see you at the show.